Hey, LarkenRose here, and Trump supporters will be happy to hear that this video isn't making fun of them, for the most part. It's bashing the political left that don't believe in anything at all. Now, we have these massive protests around the country, the hands-off thing, a bunch of just random fluff, of lots of upset Democrats. And I don't sympathize with any of them. None. Because none of them have a shred of principle. None of them has a moral position. All of them advocate widespread political violence. Now, the funny thing is, there is plenty about Trump that is worth condemning and protesting and pointing out and bashing and whatever you want to call it. So the problem is not, hey, you're criticizing that guy. There are lots of reasons to criticize that guy. The problem is that most Democrats are absolute freaking hypocrites for criticizing Trump because of how they do it. He's trying to deport people. Well, Democrats do that all the time. Well, he's trying to raise taxes. Well, Democrats do that all the time. Well, he's pushing these tariffs. Yet Democrats do that all the time. Well, he has all these authoritarian things. Yeah, Democrats do that all the time. Can you think of anything other than he's in the other party that's an actual fundamental reason for you Democrats to object to him? And, well, I don't like the way he talks is not really a good enough reason. If somebody was a flamboyant, obnoxious bastard and was a Democrat and advocated all the things that you voted for before, you wouldn't be complaining about it. You'd probably cheer for it. So all these protests are just a perfect example of how the entire political system and the whole picking sides of left and right and Democrat and Republican, trying to get the human livestock to argue with each other about who the new plantation manager should be, has nothing to do with principle. And it's designed to divide and conquer. Because there is not an actual devout Democrat anywhere that has any principles at all at this point. The few who had any principles before have abandoned the party because they realized, oh, this is the party of warmongering, just like the Republicans. And tax increases, just like the Republicans. And deportations, just like the Republicans. And run down the list of all this authoritarian BS. There's no difference. There's a slight difference in their rhetoric and no difference in what they actually do. And so all these self-righteous leftists out there complaining about things that Trump is doing, it's just pathetic and it's hypocritical and it's bullshit. Even though there are absolutely things that Trump is doing that should be criticized and condemned and stopped and resisted by force if necessary. But it's so bizarre to watch how easily malleable and manipulatable, I'll pretend that's a word, easy to be manipulated, the Democrats are when they have these big sort of vague, we don't like Orange Man. So there really is, as much as I hate the term because Trump supporters use it as a catch-all excuse for never responding to criticism, but the Trump derangement syndrome thing, there are liberals who just flip out because of him personally and don't actually have focused, like, philosophical or even policy objections to particular things. So you have this big vague protest, and if you ask them, okay, what's this all about? What evil thing are you protesting? Well, just, here we have this laundry list of random things, all of which our own people have done along the way. But now it's bad and we're complaining about it. By the way, the Republicans do the exact same thing. They condemn the Democrats do it when they do it, and then they do the exact same thing and cheer for it. But there is no, this supposed righteous, like, rebelliousness. You're not righteous and you're not rebellious if you're just whining against Trump in general without actually having any philosophical basis. For example, the Supreme Court just ruled, they've been ruling on different things. That in itself is really frustrating because the media always oversimplifies what court rulings are about, and then people get all huffy in both directions and none of them understand what it actually was. So the Supreme Court has ruled, well, is the president allowed to use this act to do this sort of thing? And people will generalize what the ruling actually means. So then they got around to saying, yeah, it wasn't okay for you to take that guy and ship him to a slave camp in El Salvador with no due process and no trial and no charges and no even accusation, really, other than saying he's a bad guy, he's like a gang member or something, so ship him off. So the Supreme Court said, no, that wasn't okay and you have to bring him back. And it's going to be interesting how that plays out. That is an actual principle. I mean, screw the court and statism entirely. But the idea of, yeah, it's really not okay for government to just say, we don't like this guy, he's bad. So we don't have to prove anything. You don't get a jury trial. You don't even get a judge trial. In fact, he did go before an immigration judge, and the immigration judge said, yeah, you're not allowed to deport him. And they just did anyway. So it's that's worse than no due process. He had due process. The judge said you can't deport him, and Trump and his stooges said, no, we're going to anyway. So yeah, you can point out that principle. If there were a big protest saying it's not okay for a ruling class to, even if you're a statist, you should understand it's not okay for them to just whisk somebody off into a foreign slave camp. There's so many levels of that is horrible just in that one story. So if you're protesting that and saying this is really bad, okay, then you at least have a point, regardless of what other people agree and disagree or whatever. You have an actual moral or philosophical point to say it's not okay, see if this sounds familiar, to deprive somebody of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. Gee, what a novel thought. Somebody should probably write that down somewhere. Call it the Fifth Amendment. So yeah, you can have an actual position on that. But if you ask the average protester, who's out there whining at Trump just in general vague terms, well, what do you think of the due process clause of the Fifth Amendment? And exactly what due process do you think? So they'll just go, well, Orange Man bad. So there is room to bash those people for not actually having a philosophy. They're just emotionally angry at that guy, and they don't exactly know why. And yeah, so there are a bunch of Democrats that do that. Now, meanwhile, there's a bunch of Trump supporters where if anybody points out the actual evil authoritarian bullshit that Trump's advocating, like the example I just gave, they'll just say, that's Trump derangement syndrome. Yeah, pointing out that he's literally, openly a wannabe dictator and openly, obviously thinks he should unilaterally get to control all sorts of things without even Congress's help. You think pointing that, that's just because you're deranged, because Trump. So the flip side of Trump derangement syndrome is the Republicans doing the exact same thing in the opposite direction, which is cheering for anything that goofball, power-happy war criminal does, including literal war crimes, and including socialism, the Doge dividends. Yeah, stick a different label on massive socialist handouts and suddenly they're okay, right, Republicans? It's the same stupid bias in both directions, which says whether it's our team or your team, that's what matters. And that's all those protests of the Democrats are about. He's on the other team, not on our team. Well, is there any fundamental difference? No. Not even the tiniest shred of a fundamental difference. But the fact that you can get people so riled up at each other and so angry at each other, we're going to go out and protest. Now, a lot of the time, Democrat protests are the result of people with lots of money paying people to go protest and make it look like a grassroots thing. I'm sure Republicans do that some too. I think Democrats tend to do it way more. But whether it's people acting on their own or people being paid to go pretend that they're acting on their own protesting, it's still just a show, and all it does is reinforce the idea of you're either in this camp or you're in that camp. Those are the only two choices, and it doesn't particularly matter what the camps are doing. It doesn't even matter if the camps all do pretty much the same thing, as long as you see that division as the thing that matters. And there have been so many people who've done a man in the street interviews that point this out when they say, like, they'll go to Democrats and say, what do you think about Trump advocating this bill that blah, blah, and then they'll describe something that the political left actually introduced or a bill they passed or pushed. And knee-jerk camp mentality, pack mentality stupidity, they'll see, oh, that's just horrible that he would do such a thing. Okay, well, it's actually your party that did that. Gzzz, and smoke starts coming out their ears. And the same thing is in the other direction. Like if you point out to, oh, don't you think it's horrible that Biden came out and said he believes in taking the guns first and going through due process second? Aren't you just outraged? This is a horrible, horrible thing. This is the end of the world as we know it. Oh, by the way, it was Trump who said that. Oh, well, he probably didn't mean it. And if he did mean it, you have to look at it in context. And besides, he's excuse. Because none of them have any principles at all. So much so that, like, the man in the street who can just ask them, what do you think of this policy coming from Trump? I automatically hate it. Do you know anything about it? No, but it came from Trump. And how about you? What do you think of it? Oh, it's awesome. Do you know anything about it? No, but if it came from my side, it's awesome. It's that stupid on both sides. And what's really pathetic is, again, some of the people were paid to do this, but if that many people go out of their way and they take time out of their day to go protest and run, say what they think, like that amount of energy used up on something absolutely pointless and unprincipled is pathetic. And that is the reason there is a political system. That is the reason the ruling classes let people vote. Because they know, you should watch Jones Plantation, by the way, if you're not aware of how this works. They know that giving the human livestock the opportunity to scream at each other and then argue over who the next plantation manager should be is an outlet for their frustration. And more importantly, an outlet which will accomplish exactly jack shit for the human livestock. It will change nothing at all. And the Democrats can whine and complain and have their tantrums at Trump now. It's still going to go left, right, left, right, left, right. You're going to get stomped on by both jackboots for the rest of your life until enough people disobey and resist the ruling class out of power. I don't know how many centuries it takes for people to learn that lesson, but so far they're just screaming at the other side. But the fact that, like, once upon a time, when I was growing up, the political debates, they were still completely disingenuous. They were still manipulative, emotional bullshit. But at least they were at a higher level of intellect. Like, they actually described philosophical positions that they didn't really believe in, and specific policies. Well, we think that the better approach is not robbing productive people and giving free money to other people. It's making there be incentives for those people to have jobs by maybe giving them a tax break or whatever. And the other side is, no, there are some people down on their luck for no reason of their own. We have to focus on making a welfare state and a safety net to catch them when they fall on hard times. So you could actually describe two flavors. Now, there were two flavors of statism, but you could actually describe some differences. Now, in practice, there was still no difference because what they actually did was they took turns, and Democrats and Republicans were both in Congress the whole time doing the warmongering and the welfare state and everything in between. But they used to at least have to describe something that sounded pretty different. And now they don't at all. And there's a bunch of examples, and a bunch of people making fun of it is now, yeah, the left is out there showing how virtuous they are by lighting electric vehicles on fire. Wait, weren't you the ones saying everybody should have electric vehicles? Weren't you literally the ones buying Teslas in particular and virtue signaling about it? I care about the environment because what I'm doing now. And now you're carving swastikas on the cars that those liberals bought, and you're too stupid to notice the irony and the hypocrisy, because all you can think is that group bad, me group good, ooga, and that the other party is doing the exact same thing. But the fact that they're barely even putting up a facade of any actual difference, Trump pushing the first of all, massive tax increases and pushing socialist handouts. They're still talking about huge dividends of just massive socialist handouts. And it was Trump who signed the massive increases in federal spending his first time around. Like, are Republicans pretending to be for fiscal responsibility? Go look at those budgets. Was that fiscally responsible? Where were all the Republicans going, whoa, this is bad, don't do that? Well, they were weirdly silent because their focus was that team versus our team. We have to support our team. And you can see a bunch of that now. I mean, just frickin' J.D. Vance, like, openly, vociferously bashed the hell out of Trump, and for good reasons. And now suddenly he's the vice president saying all these wonderful things about how great the... Did Trump change? No. Does it mean that JD never had any principles? Yep. He was just playing the game of my team versus your team. But he'll kiss the ass of Mango Mussolini, just like a whole bunch of other Republicans are doing. And when one doesn't, even just on one issue, if like Massey or Rand Paul goes, I don't think this is good, look how loudly and zealously other Republicans, including Trump, will attack that person. How dare you say anything negative about anybody on our team? Showing that they have no loyalty to anything like a principle or an idea, not even a bad idea. It's just teams. Then the Democrats are out there playing their part, protesting that team in favor of their team. What did Biden do that you thought was like super great? Well, he wasn't corrupt. He was ridiculously, openly, obviously corrupt. In the most direct, obvious way, him and his son Hunter. It could hardly get more obvious. And on his way out, he suddenly issues a bunch of pardons for people before they were accused or charged of anything. That's not at all suspicious. You know that whole COVID thing where we lied our asses off and exerted authoritarian control over all of you and lied all over the place and enriched Big Pharma? Well, we're going to pardon a bunch of the people who were involved in that before anybody even charges with them. Oh yeah, Biden's a real man of the people. He's really looking out for the little guy. How stupid are you that you didn't scream at Biden for corruption and selling out to big corporations and being a crooked, power-happy piece of crap? Just as much as Trump has. If you were a Democrat and you said nothing about that, and that's almost all Democrats, and your excuse was, well, it was really important that our team won and his team lost, you're an apologist for an evil piece of shit. And your complaint about Republicans is that they're apologists for an evil piece of shit. They're you. You could just put up a mirror in between and just have one party yelling at itself. It would be the same thing. There's no fundamental difference. So, and, I wish I sort of had infinite time and lots of clones of me. Not really, that would be creepy and weird. To go out into these protests and do some candles in the dark with these people, one by one. I mean, if I could get them to stop screaming long enough to answer a question. And of course, the moment you answer a question, you must support Trump and be a Nazi and a racist. No, I'm just asking you questions. So in that setting, there might not be a whole lot of thought going on. It would be fun, but it would be fun to get in there and see if I could find in the mind of, some random protester on the left, because they think they're the good guys. Everybody thinks they're the good guy as they cheer for their team of authoritarian, parasitic, evil crooks. But to see, well, what are you actually against specifically? That guy. No, not the guy. Like, if he had no power, he wouldn't matter. Authoritarian legal issues, what are you against? What do you see as some horrible injustice? What's some law you think that people don't have an obligation to obey because it's that bad? and to start them down the train of going, oh, well, I think this law is really bad, and we, like, for example, maybe I don't think I should be forced to fund this big war machine because I think it's doing evil stuff. I don't even think it's protecting us. And I would tell that person, I agree. I don't think you should be forced to fund that either. Even if there's some kind of protection that I do want, I certainly wouldn't want you forced to fund it just because I want it. If you don't want it, I don't want you forced to fund it. And almost anybody can go, oh, thanks, that's nice. Like, it's so rare for anybody in any political party to hear that from somebody who isn't on their team, their authoritarian bootlicking team, to basically tell them, I want more freedom for you than you want for you, which is true of every single person in all of those Democrat protests whining about Trump, whining about this evil, horrible Nazi fascist. Like, yeah, but you've advocated and voted for things that are just as bad. They may have been slightly different things, but they still resulted in innocent people being robbed and dominated and forcibly controlled. But as long as the slavesmiths can keep people focused on teams and keep them from actually thinking about principles and concepts, then there's nothing to fear from the people, because they're just mad at each other and none of them know why. None of them can even articulate why, except in the most vague, meaningless, hypocritical terms. Because if you were actually against this particular type of authoritarian evil, then you would have condemned it when your team did it too. But you didn't. Neither side did that. Neither side is doing that now. Because you've been tricked into viewing the teams as way more important than the principles or morality. That's true of every Democrat and every Republican, and they make it really obvious in the way they behave and in the way they talk that their first loyalty is to the massa whose ass they kiss, whether it's right or left. And the idea of actual principles, they'll give lip service to that. Lots of Republicans give lip service to the Constitution. Zero, absolutely zero Republicans, not one Republican anywhere actually gives a shit about the Constitution. And then when Trump is the one doing fascist authoritarian stuff, suddenly the Democrats pretend to give a shit about the Constitution. This is a constitutional crisis. Oh, shut the hell up. None of you have ever given a crap about the actual Constitution, what it describes. Now, as I've said a million times, what the Constitution describes is still illegitimate authoritarian bullshit, but it's like this much authoritarian bullshit compared to what Republicans and Democrats want, which is just an astronomical amount of centralized authoritarian control over all sorts of things and massive extortion of everybody everywhere. And so there is no principle, even the ones they pretend to believe in. Well, we're for the Constitution. If you're a Republican, no, you're not. And if you're a Democrat, no, you're not. You're just lying your ass off to sound like you're principled. And if you get questioned for 5 seconds, like, okay, where in the Constitution are the feds authorized to forcibly control in any way who can come in and out of the country? Well, this is an emergency, and this is, so in other words, you don't give a shit that that's 100% unconstitutional, just undeniably, obviously, indisputably, and you don't give a shit because right now your team is saying it's really important that we have this arbitrary, unlimited, authoritarian, centralized power. So, yeah, Constitution's out the window for you, and in 100 other ways. Standing army isn't supposed to exist at all, and now Trump's bragging about $1 trillion military budget. That's some fiscal responsibility right there, because it was only already by far the biggest war machine in the history of the world. Let's make it even bigger so we can do even more war crimes, and Trump can brag about them. But even when they pretend to have principles, they're always lying. And it's so brazen. My body, my choice. Okay, I don't really want to get this injection. Shut up, you should be put out of business and maybe caged. Okay, so what you mean by my body, my choice is you want to be able to have an abortion and you don't give a fuck what anybody else wants to do with their own body. You do not at all believe in bodily autonomy. You just like using that phrase for that particular issue because it makes you sound like you're principled when you're not at all in any way, shape, or form. And I could do the same thing to the right because they all absolutely do that. Pro-life, except the people over in Yemen, fuck them. Just blow them up. We don't know who they are. They were in the vicinity of a guy that the ruling class says is bad. So when they get blown up, oh well, we'll make excuses. That mass murder is fine. Don't have an abortion, because then we're pro-life. But when we're cheering for warmongers and war crimes, nah, screw life. So none of them mean anything they say, including when they're trying to do sound bites to sound principled. None of them are principled. And so it's sad watching those protests, because watching that much time and just human energy being expended on nothing. It's not even that you were pushing something in the right direction and failed. There was no direction. You were just bitching about the other team. It's two street gangs shooting at each other. You both suck. You're both thieves. You're both advocates of violent aggression against lots of innocent people. You just want to be the ones wielding that power, and you have tantrums when the other one is wielding that power. That doesn't make you principled. It doesn't make you righteous. Trying to virtue signal that you prefer this authoritarian, power-happy, evil piece of shit who advocates or who uses widespread violence against innocent people instead of that one. That's how much you care as a liberal. You care about others, unless they don't pay for your welfare state or disobey any of the stupid laws that you condone. So it's sad. It's sad and frustrating. Mostly, if I'm not being pissed off, mostly it's sad because most of those people, they think that they're the good guys and they're trying to be the good guys. Now, at some point, it's kind of hard to claim that when you have to intentionally shut your eyes really tight to pretend that Kamala was one of the good guys or Biden was one of the good guys. Like Obama, it would be pretty easy to lie to yourself and pretend he was trying to serve us. He wasn't. He was feeding the war machine and an authoritarian psycho and a war criminal. But at least his rhetoric was such that he could dupe the ignorant who weren't really paying attention. At this point, both sides are cheering for just monsters. Just fucking psychopaths. And if you're extra loud when complaining about that one and say almost nothing about the one that your team is cheering for, you're just a pawn of the worst people in the world. Way to go. And you can think that you're the good guy and you can virtue signal about how much you care compared to those right-wingers. Or the same thing in the other direction. You're just a pawn of the worst people in the world. You're not opposing evil. You're just complaining about which boot is inflicting that evil on the world. Where were you when the Democrats were doing their warmongering, of which they did plenty? And they were deporting people, and they were arresting people, and they were targeting their political opponents using the justice system, which Trump loudly complained about, and then did the exact same thing in the other direction. But oddly, for some reason, none of them actually did anything which would threaten the system. None of them released the Epstein evidence. Trump took credit for doing that and then didn't do that. And even a bunch of Republicans are like, okay, that's a little bit suspicious. Gee, why could that possibly be? Because somebody has dirt on lots and lots of people in power, and they're Republicans and Democrats, and they're heinous, evil psychopaths who should probably be thrown into chippers. So we're not going to open that can of worms. We'll pretend, we the politicians will pretend to be enemies, but we're not going to mention that. And the whole promise to let you know what really happened on 9/11, we're not really going to tell you that either, because if you found that out and you found out that at least the U.S. ruling class let it happen, let several thousand Americans be murdered, you're probably not going to be too fond of either party, because you're going to find out, yeah, both parties let that happen. They're just two faces of one ruling class. So all the things that actually matter, none of them ever bring up. None of them ever reveal. Even the JFK assassination, we're going to declassify and release all the documents. Well, all the documents that don't really matter and don't really tell you what happened, because we can't have you knowing that. So it was a big nothing burger. And Trump admitted it was a big nothing burger. Well, it's 8 bajillion pages of essentially nothing. Like some dumb little tidbits here and there. If somebody mentioned something about that. Didn't actually told you what happened. Because for you to learn that level of stuff might make this team of voters and this team of voters both recognize, holy shit, we're both voting for mass murdering psychopaths. Maybe we should stop yelling at each other, and we should get together and oppose the ruling class that's been playing us off of each other all this time. Yeah, that's what you should do.